What's going on, guys? My name is Brandon. Welcome to Audio Addiction, where you can find latest album reviews, you can find our band interviews, and you can find live coverage of the concerts that we get. I've been posting a lot of band interviews as of recently. I post them Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're into seeing some more like underground bands, definitely check them out. I always love doing them, whether it be on the internet or in person. I try to kind of find a nice mix between those two. So if you do that, check them out. And if you're in a band, hit my DMs up or email us. Links are in the description. But I've been trying to get a lot more album reviews and live sets up to you guys. So definitely be on the lookout for those in the coming weeks and months. But tonight we're going to be talking about Issue's newest record, Beautiful Oblivion.
I got the keys, but you rather lie to me. Oh, why you do that? There's a million.
So, if you've been a fan of this band for a while, or maybe you're just finding out about them, Issues is a band based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I did a review of their last record, Headspace, in, I believe it was 2017, I believe, because it's 2019, usually it takes about 2 years, and so I was really excited about this one, considering that Mike left the band as of the last record, and I was curious how they were going to sound, if they're going to kind of keep the same thing. And they actually went to a different producer this time. Headspace was produced by Chris Crummett, who's one of my favorite producers in the scene now, but they went with Howard Benson this time around. So new producer, new sound, member change, all that stuff. I was curious on how they were going to approach this record. So I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on each track, go through some pros and cons, and then fish it out with an overall rating. So the first track is called Here's to You. This one's really awesome. I love the sort of ethereal ambient electronic atmosphere created at the beginning. I know that they've been doing a lot of work with Lo-Fi and also Sky's brother, who, he's been in the band as kind of like, I feel like, an underlying person, and obviously he's been in pretty much every Issues record to date. So it's just cool to hear him, obviously put his little flavors, his touches, and like his programming onto any record that they do. I've always appreciated what he's done as kind of a background person to Issues, because a lot of the sounds that I feel like they would be like missing out on if they didn't have him. So I always like to just give credit to him on pretty much the review. I think I gave some credit to him on the Headspace review as well, but I always love his like electronic influence on what they do. But continuing on with the song, I love the sort of soulfulness, the R&B inspired vibes, especially with the guitars, and I think the bass as well. It just adds this really nice depth to the song, and especially just like obviously AJ tunes to like a really low, I don't even know what tuning he's in. I think it might be drop G, but I'm not entirely sure. But just that sort of like heavy 7-string work that he's doing, I think really adds a really cool depth to the track. And I've always appreciated how they've been able to kind of combine like that sort of heavier metalcore, genty sound with the sort of R&B soul, neo soul sort of vibe that's going on here. I also feel like bass wise, Sky is just ripping it. I think throughout this entire record, it's something that you'll find is a very common thread to a lot of the songs that they have on here, and I think it's a really great continuation to what they had going on in Headspace. I love that Sky actually got to do some vocals in between the 2 minutes and 39-second mark to around the 3-minute mark, and then he comes back in at around the 3 minutes and 54-second mark to the end of the track as well. I was definitely surprised because I actually had to look on a forum to find out that he actually did the vocals on the track. I didn't think it was Tyler because I think his register isn't that low, so I was very curious on either if they kind of like dubbed Tyler's voice lower, or if they actually had Sky do vocals. And I actually love his vocals, and I would love to hear more utilized in future releases, because I think Obviously with his kind of low timbre, matched with Tyler's like mid-range sort of high falsettos and high voice. I would love to hear that combination. I think the harmonies would just be like butter. So hopefully they get to do that on future releases. That's something that I've always loved regardless of genre, but I would love to hear that. And overall, I think this is a very eclectic track. It really kind of speaks to the entire record in terms of like different genres that you'll be getting, and obviously, the issues sound that you've come to know and love. So we're going to move into track number 2, which is Drink About It. I will say this song off the bat, I was not particularly on board with at first, but I think I've definitely grown to love this track a lot more over time. I would say more so in the context of the record as opposed to just the single. I also love that, Sky has, again, more of a larger role in this record in general. His bass lines are just super ripping, and I love it, especially those sort of like funky bass riffs that he's got going on. I know he's like immensely talented, so I love hearing that. I will say the chorus on this track is super catchy. That was one thing that even when I first listened to it, it was something that I really just loved and, really appreciated because it has that sort of pop mentality to it. I love the sort of darker undertones of this track. I would hope that they would play on this a little bit more and kind of had that sort of dark pop vibe, along with their sort of R&B and obviously their metalcore influences as well. But I like that they tried something different in terms of the vocals in the verses. I won't say whether or not it's good or bad. I just particularly wasn't a fan initially. However, I will say, much like the song, I definitely grew on me, and I will say that this is one of my favorite singles off the record. I know they obviously had Drink About It. They also had Tapping Out, and then Flexin' was the most recent one. But I think out of those 3 singles, those are the ones that this one was the one that I enjoyed the most, obviously. So we're gonna move into track number 3, which is Fine Forever. I love AJ's riffs on this song. I think that, even on the stuff on Headspace, I think that he's been able to kind of evolve his sound and obviously include a lot more sort of heaviness to his riffs, but also a lot more jazz influence, which I like because I've definitely grown up around jazz and that sort of style of music. And so I feel like, the inclusion of that and just the influence of that, pre pre Beautiful Oblivion era. I think it was really sick, and I like that they again are continuing to do that. This one has a lot of elements of kind of R&B and pop, and then mixed with that sort of classic issue sound that you've come to know and love. And I would also say again another thing that I feel like I'm kind of beating a dead horse on, but Sky's just riffing on these bass riffs. I love the sort of slappy, sort of funkiness that he offers to the tracks, and I feel like as the album had gone on, it was something that I was like actively listening for because some of the stuff kind of gets a little bit muddled in it, but like they are just some of the coolest riffs that I've heard from a bass player in a very long time. So definitely the unsung hero of this record and this song in general. I definitely feel like this fits Tyler's voice the best. Obviously his wheelhouse is definitely more R&B pop inspired stuff, and I think that this song definitely caters to his vocals and the way that he's been doing it for God knows how long, since those Woe Is Me days. The addition of sax was really nice. I think they bring a lot of those sort of the midnight, which is a lot of bands I feel like as of recently have come to kind of co-sign as musicians. And so I love the influence of sax in a lot of the more like modern metalcore and kind of like stuff that's coming out recently. Definitely a great instrument, and I love hearing it whenever it's on a really awesome track. I like that they brought back the group vocals as well too. Definitely harkens back to their self-titled record, which is really cool. And I've always loved the group vocals. I think it's just this real like this real gospel-esque thing that I know that they do well. So it was cool to hear that inclusion as well, and definitely something I dug. So we're gonna move into track number 4, which is Tapping Out. This is this is not the most recent single. This is the first single that was released, and I thought this one was pretty decent. I still think it is pretty kind of middle of the road for me. And this might sound a little bit crazy, but I feel like this track as a standalone feels better than it does as on the record. And what I mean by that is that I feel like in this sort of pacing of the record, this one feels the most, I guess, out of place. I wouldn't say it's like too far off the beaten path, but it just doesn't sit right with me in the record. And so, it's just one of those songs that I feel like is just that heavy song that I feel like is just kind of pandering to people that want a heavier song off the record. And I've always loved the way that Issues has been able to kind of combine things in their music. And so I feel like there are some aspects to Issues in this track. However, in the kind of concept of the record, it doesn't feel like it is, in the same vein as what they're doing. Obviously, it's a heavy track. Obviously, it has all the members of Issues on it. But it just feels like a little bit almost as if it's like an estranged brother or sister. It's very weird. But I still think it's a solidly written song. But I think it's a little bit of pandering in my opinion. So we're gonna move into track number 5, which is Without You. This one's one of my favorites, and I think this one definitely took me by surprise upon first listen when I was listening to the record at the beginning. But much like Fine Forever, I feel like this one fits very much in Tyler's vocal alley. It has that sort of R&B core vibe, which is what I was saying an absolute ton in the record for album review for Headspace. But I love the layers going on in this track. I think they've always been able to kind of find that balance of really strong electronics, really strong like guitar, instrumentals, bass, drums, and just vocals in a unique way, and kind of able to mash both of those. This one's super groovy, super funky. I love that they're kind of incorporating more of that sort of pop element to their music. And not to say that it was, not at the forefront before, but I feel like they're really kind of, you know, actively bringing it into their music. And so I love that. I hope that they continue to do it. It just feels like kind of an amalgamation of like funk, R&B, jazz, things of that nature. It really kind of feels like a really awesome song, well written. Definitely one of my favorite tracks off the record, and I think it is just beautifully arranged, and how it is just not only heavy but also very much influenced by a lot of the stuff that I had talked about previously. So we're going to move into track number 6, which is called Rain. This one is also a favorite of mine. It feels almost like Hero 2.0, which is a fantastic track, and if you haven't listened to it on Headspace, go give it a listen, because it definitely harkens back to that. And I love when bands kind of take that sort of influence and kind of from a previous track and kind of do it in a new record. I think it feels very much along the lines of a continuation of that. I also love the strong sort of jazz influence in this track as well. I think much like Without You, I think whenever they kind of incorporate those sort of jazz phrasings and chords, it's really interesting, and I think it brings that like refreshing element that I feel like is along the lines and on par with what Issues does. I will say that it just has this sort of vibe and that energy that I have been missing, that I love from Issues. I love when they have that sort of like that high energy, that song that when you're listening to it, and you will see it live most likely. Hopefully they'll play Rain. I would assume that they would, because it's just such a great, high energy track. I can just feel the energy of that, and I can't wait to see it live when they do their album release tour. But definitely give this one a listen. All the songs are out, obviously, so check that one out. So we're gonna move into track number 7, which is called Downfall. This one is one of my favorites as well. I love the sort of soft jazzy sort of feel, and it feels like kind of a trend a little bit throughout this record. But I love when those little jazz chord phrasings, man. AJ's got it. So especially in the first verse, and then I think towards the first chorus is when really everything kind of hits. I will say that this one is up there with the heavier tracks off the record. I would say up there with Tapping Out, and then second best I'd say is also a pretty heavy track. Also the title track, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But this track definitely feels fully like Issues fully realized, you know, like it has that sort of R&B soul vibe, jazz influence as well, but also with those sort of heavier undertones that, you know, bar from metalcore and gent and stuff like that. It's easily one of the best songs that I feel like meshes both worlds of the genres that I had just mentioned. However, I'd love to hear some more screams. This track definitely lacked some screams, and there were certain parts throughout the song that I felt like would have been further accentuated with some screams. And I know that not only Tyler can do a little bit of screaming, but I also know that AJ does some screaming. Obviously, tracks like Blue Wall, he's done some screaming for. Tapping Out on this record, he's done. And I know Sky screams too. If you watch the live video that they did for, I believe it was Warped Tour, they all three of them screamed. So I know that they are very capable of doing it. It's a matter of if they want to do it or not. But I will say that like breakdown part towards the like maybe 3/4 of the way through the track, I would have loved to hear some more screaming. I know that they did it towards the end of it, but I felt like that whole gap was just like open real estate that could have definitely used some screaming. And obviously a void of Mike felt in that portion of the track, but it was definitely a missing element that I feel like would have made that breakdown just that much sweeter. But still great riffs, still a great song nonetheless. So we're gonna move into track number 8, which is Second Best. This one is also a favorite of mine. Kind of much for the same reasons of why I like Downfall. It's a little bit heavier, you know, it's keeping just sort of that sort of heavier vibe that Issues is known for, and I think that they do a good job of blending both of the genres. The chorus is definitely my favorite part of the track. It's super catchy. They've really got a great hook going on in this track. But also, I will say it does lack some screaming as well. I definitely feel like it would have sold me on the sort of lyricism and sort of the anger and just the feelings that you would feel in this track being kind of the second best of, you know, someone in your life. So I would have loved to hear that sort of like punch, that little anger, that rage, that like sadness that you feel. I think it would have accentuated this track that much more. And so I will say it was definitely another, again, missed opportunity, but, you know, it's their record, and so I digress. So we're going to move into track number 9, which is Get It Right. This one's one of my favorites as well, as you're noticing a trend, but I love the sort of 80s funk feel to it. I know a lot of people really aren't on board with that sort of sound, but I think that was one of the main reasons why I loved Headspace, was just because it was so different. And I feel like, you know, bands weren't really kind of doing that stuff at the time. I know Don Broco was definitely getting big around the Headspace era of Issues, but I felt like they kept very much into their lane and didn't have what Issues was having. And so I feel like there's more bands now that are doing that sort of stuff. And so I really feel like, you know, I'm hoping that Issues kind of at more at the forefront of what's going on. But getting back to the track, I definitely feel like there's channeling a lot more of that R&B soul vibe, definitely from the 80s and 90s. You can definitely hear that sort of 80s, 90s pop influence as well. And I just love that Tyler was really doing his thing on this track. It felt, you know, I felt like he was just freestyling on a track. It really felt flowy, it felt groovy, and kind of the mesh of both worlds, as I had mentioned. It definitely plays more to the sort of pop influence, but obviously with the sort of heavier guitar parts, it felt very much in line with what Issues does. I love the sort of huge sound that they're able to achieve. All the thanks to Lo-Fi. I feel like he adds that sort of just like fullness that I love from a lot of these tracks. It's just that like real big energy, and definitely one of those songs that I love an absolute lot. So we're gonna move into track number 9, which is Flexin'. This is the most recent single. I will say at first I was just kind of shocked and a little bit appalled at the initial track. However, I am a true fan of music, so I wanted to kind of give it more of a listen and, you know, not kind of just be like, oh man, this sucks, just because I feel like it is so different. But I dig the instrumentals of this track. I will say my current critique of it is that I don't think it is as bad as what people think it is. It is very different from what most people would expect from Issues. It definitely pulls a lot from like Prince, MJ, a little bit of like Britney Spears, a little bit of like Christina Aguilera, definitely those like 90s pop sort of artists at that time. But I think the main reason why I love this track, or why I feel like it's not as bad, is just that it's definitely that sort of 90s pop, if you like, or 80s pop, like, you know what I mean? If you weren't in that time frame or that space, I feel like it would fit very well with what they're doing. Obviously, they don't have H strings back in the 80s and 90s, but it definitely feels very much in line with that. And so I like that, it's a track that's out of left field, and a track that I feel like most people wouldn't expect from them. I will also say that it gives me a strong sort of Don Broco vibe. I know that they incorporate a lot of sort of pop influence, especially like older pop influence as well, but this one was definitely interesting, to say the least. I won't say that it is necessarily bad, but it definitely was not one of my favorites off the record. So we're going to move into track number 10, which is No Problem, Keep It Alive. This one is one of my favorites as well. Again, kind of playing off of what I was saying in Flexin, was that this one also has that sort of old school pop vibe, but I also feel like it also has elements of their sort of heavierness towards this record as well. And I will say, I love Tyler's falsetto. I've always been a big fan of it, but this track, I feel like, is just so buttery. It's so smooth, and I love it. He's, again, one of the best vocalists in the scene currently, without a doubt. But I also feel like a big contribution or contributor to this record is definitely Sky, as I had mentioned many times through the beginning half of this review. But I feel like he really rips it on this track, really holding the song down. And I always love that they keep expanding upon what they're doing in terms of like sounds and vibes and stuff like that. This one definitely, again, has a big low-file influence on it as well, but I also feel like it also has a strong representation of Issues as well. So really well done track, and I feel like one that maybe most people would be interested in listening to. So we're gonna move into track number. It's going to be number 11, because I can't count apparently. And it's called Your Sake, and this one is that ballad song. I was kind of not expecting it, because you know as listening through to the record, I was like, oh, maybe they'll just kind of keep the same energy. And when I got to like Your Sake, I was like, maybe it might be like a slow song, but I was definitely not expecting a ballad. And I've always, again, loved Tyler's vocals, but I feel like in this track, he really kind of just, sells it home with those clean, beautiful vocals that he's had for a very long time. And so this one, a solid track. While it's not one of my favorites, just because I feel like it's just a solidly written song. I love the arrangement, and I also feel like Tyler is definitely the most vulnerable on this track, and you can hear in kind of like the timbre of his voice. And I love when artists have that sort of emotional connection to a song, because you can definitely hear it. It's not faked. It's not, it's a genuine reaction. So I felt like that when I first listened to it, and I still feel like the same thing when I listen to it every time. So I love that, really, Tyler sold it home on that in terms of just the emotional value of it. But I think instrumentally, it was a beautiful track, despite it not probably being one of my favorite tracks off the record. So we're going to move into the last track number 12, which is Beautiful Oblivion, the title track of the record. And this one feels very modern pop influenced. However, I will say that this one really kind of gives you a glimpse into what I feel like is the next Issues, or what they're going to do in the next record, is really kind of infusing a lot of like modern pop influence, maybe like some old school pop influence, along with their sort of metalcore and R&B and soul and roots, and really kind of come up with something unique. And this song I was really taken aback by, especially upon first listen, because I was like listening to it, obviously, and I was like, okay, this is definitely like more pop, like modern pop influence. And then the guitars came in, and I was like, wow, this is really just eloquently put together. And I was just definitely floored by how well this song kind of works with, not only their core sound, but also with like some new sounds that they were able to like take into account along the way. And again, their infusion of metalcore, pop, R&B, soul, really comes out very strong in this song, and I think it is a great closer track. So, some pros and cons that I have about this record. Some cons I'll start off with because I feel like I should. There was definitely some missed opportunities for some screaming. I know that they have spoken a lot about being kind of heavier, but I feel like a big primary point of what their band was screaming, and obviously, with the absence of Mike, I feel like there was some opportunity to kind of, either enlist AJ or Sky or both of them to do some screaming. And so there was definitely some songs that I felt like would have hit just that little bit more with some screaming, or just, obviously paired well with like Tyler's vocals, or just some real gaps in the record that I felt like could have used some awesome screaming. I think there's a bit of pandering, a little bit. I would say more so just in tapping out. I feel like mostly it felt like just that heavy song that people wanted to hear from them, because obviously with Mike being gone, they wanted to hear what they sounded like. So I felt that way, just pretty much only exclusively to tapping out. So I wouldn't really say that's necessarily a con, but I wasn't typically a fan of that either. But some pros and cons. I love the evolution of this band. I think that they've always been able to kind of do different things. I think there's definitely an element of growth in this record as well. I would say it's definitely a mix of melodic. I would say more so melodic than it is heavy, but there are definitely some heavy moments in this record. And I would also say it's pretty on par with Headspace. I don't think it will beat it, in my opinion. I just feel like that record was just extremely well executed from front to back. And so this one, I think would rival it. I maybe have to give it a little bit more listens to really just be like on board with it. I'm not saying that it's a terrible record by any means, but I'm curious to see where they're going next. If they're definitely going more in that sort of more pop direction and pulling out from this sort of heaviness, or if they will kind of find the balance that they did in not only this record but also in Headspace. So my overall rating for Issues Beautiful Oblivion, I'm going to be giving it a 9.4 out of 10. It's definitely one that I feel like a lot of you should give a listen to, especially if you were a fan of Headspace. I think you'll dig this one a lot. I think if you were a fan of either Black Diamond or the self-titled, there are definitely moments in this record that I feel like you'll enjoy, but maybe not to the extent of people that liked Headspace for sure. But let me know in the comments what your favorite tracks are, what you like, what you disliked about the record. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I'd love to have kind of a conversation in the comments below. I think this is, again, a really good stepping stone and a good direction on where they're going, and I'm curious to see what they have in store and what they're going to do next. So if you enjoyed this review, make sure to share it, like it, subscribe. It goes a long way, guys. Thank you for the immense support. It's been just real busy, real hectic at the Audio Addiction headquarters, and always trying to bring you the freshest content that I can. Like I said, my name is Brandon. We hope you got your fix, and we'll be talking with you soon. Peace. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Of course, if you enjoy what we do, make sure to go check out the other series we do. We do album reviews, we do band interviews, and we do live videos, so definitely go check that out. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel, helps us grow. Make sure to hit that like button as well. Go follow us on social media. That's all down below. We try to keep that as updated as possible. We also made a new website where we'll be posting photos of upcoming concerts and stuff like that, which you can go check out at audioaddictionmedia.com, and come get your fix with us, guys. Talk to you later. Deuces.